Welcome, everybody, to Culture Shock Podcast. This is your boy, Pat Bayless, and I'm back in the building with a special guest. She's been here a couple of times. A dear friend of mine, I would say. A little bit of backstory is going to come through this episode, but I'm happy to have Stephanie back with us again. What's up, Steph?
What's up?
How you feeling?
I'm good. I'm great.
Anybody that doesn't know, this episode took a long time to do, but we're here now. I got to give her some slack because she gives me slack all the time.
I was working.
Yes, exactly.
Hard.
Exactly. So just to brief y'all, if y'all haven't watched some of the prior episodes, which obviously with you,
Yes.
You've been on what, 2?
2.
Yeah, so she's been on 2. She's giving different insight. This one is a little bit more personal, a little bit more deep. So everybody that's watching, make sure y'all buckle up for this one because I'm actually very interested to get into these conversations. All right, well, let's start off right from the beginning. Okay. People that don't know you, that didn't watch any of the episodes, just give them a little bit of background, where you from, where you grew up, things of that nature.
All right. So I was born in Queens in Flushing Hospital. Came to Long Island when I was like 1.5, 2 years old. And I've lived in Quorum basically my whole life. Minus 4 years, I moved out to Queens for college. Shout out to St. John's. And now I've worked my way up. So right now I'm currently working as a senior property director where I met someone. Well, not met you, but like work with you, I guess. So I work in a predominantly male-dominated industry. And yeah, I do maintenance. So not that much to me, but I'm an interesting character. So
Absolutely.
there's that.
So yeah, you're from Quorum, right? So you're from Quorum. Well, how long have me and you known each other or been around each other? Probably since well, you said you got here out?
High school. Definitely I feel like high school because I went to Longwood. That's the only school I've been to.
Only the high school?
No, I went to...
That's what I'm saying.
All the way since kindergarten, but I went to West Mill Island till
Yeah, I didn't go to
4th grade.
West Mill Island. I went
Where'd
to
you
Quorum
go?
Elementary.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so no, not there. Middle
And
school?
then Longwood Middle School, junior high, high school.
So that's probably where we ran past each other before knowing each other. I feel like we known about each other probably since high school.
Yeah, like in passing. I don't think we really became friends till probably like close to senior year.
Yes.
Like the party stage.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely the party stage.
Anybody that knows me from the party stage, that was a good time. That was a good time. Stephanie would always definitely see me out enjoying my life a little too much.
Living his best life.
Yeah, living my best life. So I want to kind of get into, like going through high school and growing up. What was the relationship like with your mom and dad? Mm-hmm. And then also, how did that impact you growing up?
My mom and dad were honestly like, I can't knock them for anything. I had amazing parents, amazing childhood. I did not have the trauma-filled story that you hear from some people. I think that my mom's always been one of my biggest supporters. She has carried me through my darkest moments. And my dad was more so the docile, calm one. He was more the voice of reason. And my mom was more like the physical person to carry me. I would say both of them are super influential just because they were dedicated to what they did. My mom's an RN. My dad was working for, at that point, Time Warner Cable, which is now Spectrum. He would work overnight. My mom would work throughout the day. And I got a lot of my work ethics from them. So they were up early, taking care of the house, taking care of the family. I just learned so much about the family dynamic from them. And I think I would not be where I am without those values that they instilled, honestly, because they were really good to me.
How many siblings do you have?
I have two brothers and a sister. So I have a sister from my dad's side, so before he met my mom. And then I have 2 brothers that we have the same parents. And we're 8 and 16 years apart.
Wow, 16-year difference. I mean, me and my brother are 8 years apart, and that's a big difference. So 16 years.
You guys are 8 years apart?
Yeah, we're 8 years apart.
I didn't know that you guys had that much of a gap.
Yeah, and you could feel that when you're growing up, like the age difference and like what you're going through. So I can't imagine 16 years apart.
16 years apart. When I was born, my brother was 16.
Are you guys all close?
So I'm close with my 2 brothers. My 2 brothers, actually, they don't speak, which sucks because I would love for us to all, like, be a unit. But I always say the one thing that makes me sad thinking about it is I don't think I'll ever get a family picture again.
Wow.
Yeah. So I have my mom and dad. They got divorced in 2018. Now they have a better relationship. Back then, not so much, but I've always said, like, I've craved, like, the family photo. Like, when I go to friends' houses and I see they have, like, the family picture, the family tree, I'm probably never going to have that, which sucks. But I have great relationships with all of them. So they consider me to be, like, the glue, like the family glue.
So within that, right, because you're talking about they got divorced. This is pretty recent, 2018.
2018.
So growing up, the dynamic of learning and wanting a relationship that almost is valued from your parents, right, was, for one, the first part of this question, how did you view relationships because of them? Like, how did you go into a relationship with somebody because of them? And I'll ask you the second part right after.
So one of the things that I think I picked up from them the closest was how they handled the home. So my dad was not, when we talk about gender roles, my dad was cooking, cleaning, taking care of the kids, getting us ready for school. My mom would work late. My mom would be helping out with if we needed money for something. So it was really very equal. And I think because of that, I also feel that even in my own relationship, things feel very like on an equal platform. I'm not one to really push for gender roles. I think that in some cases, men and women should be able to handle a home, independently. Like, I should be able to do the same things that, in my relationship that he can do. And I feel like that's what I learned from them is like, there was no meal missed. If my dad was home, he took care of it. If my mom was home, she took care of it. Both of them cleaned. They just managed the house in such a way that I was like, okay, so it's not that women are the ones that are home and waiting for, the man to take care of the bills. I can pay my own bills. I would love to have it where we share responsibility, but I can handle my own. And my mom handled hers, my dad handled his, and I wanted to be like that. I wanted it to be where at the end of the day, if I needed to, I can hold my family down. So I learned that from both of them.
I think one of the biggest things nowadays, culture in general and in relationships, is that whole gender role thing, because things have gotten so misplaced in a way of the independence part, and then people thinking, and because everybody has a mic. Everybody nowadays has a mic. You get your information from anywhere. If you like a group of people that are like-minded like you, it could recycle into the next person, somebody that's younger, somebody that you teach as a parent growing like a kid. You know what I'm saying? You could teach them these values and things. Not to say that everybody is wrong in certain ways or that way, but what you said is very key, is there should be like an equal platform. It doesn't have to be a gender role thing. There can be men that cook. There can be men that clean, and women can go out there and do that. And some women will listen to this and be like, hell no. I should be home taking care of the kids and doing that, and men should be out there. Everybody has their own opinion.
Right.
But I also wanted to get into the divorce part of it. You're older now where the divorce comes. For one, did you see it coming? And two, how did that, if anything, mess your like mental up? Because all you've seen is two parents together for such a long time.
So, no, I didn't see it coming. I thought that my parents would honestly be together forever. It all kind of came to a head because as an adult, I learned that my dad was a functioning alcoholic. And I had been sheltered from it since a child. I had always been told, well, he's tired, he's sleepy. I remember thinking as a little girl when he was acting strangely, I would look at my mom and I'm like, what's wrong with him? And she's like, oh, he's sleepy, he's tired. Because he worked overnight, so that made sense. And then one day as an adult, he was just not acting like himself. And we found a liquor bottle that was hidden in the house. And I'm like, what is this?
Opened your eyes.
And I realized looking back, like I literally remember just shutting my eyes and playing back the memories as a little girl when my mom would be like, oh no, he's just, he works overnight, he's tired. And suddenly I'm like, he wasn't tired, he was drunk. And I had blamed my mom. And I remember saying to her when I was a little older, I was a teenager, and I'm like, why are you so mean to him? Like, why do you speak to him that way? And I realized that it was her frustration and probably her trying to shelter that part of him from me, because she was very protective of how we looked at our father and what we thought about him. And he was like my first role model, and he was the first person that I swore I wanted to marry someone just like him. And I think my mom tried so hard to try to keep and preserve that image that it wore her out, and she was exhausted. And then as an adult, when I realized, oh my God, it's been alcoholism, it blew my mind because I had never known. I do not recall ever seeing drinks in the house. I didn't see that behavior that you would expect to see from someone who had like a drinking issue. But then when I got older and I got closer to it, it opened my eyes to realize that he had a serious problem. Yeah. And my mom, who I thought at that point was the enemy because she just seemed very like aggressive with him. And I think what really it was she was tired. And I didn't see it coming. So when it happened, it hit me rough because I would have never thought that my parents would ever fall apart. They seemed to have such a solid bond, but I realized that it was my mother protecting us as a mom.
Yeah.
So.
And I think even with parents, that's just normally what we do for our kids. We're going to protect them at all costs. Mm-hmm. And yeah, when you have a strong bond like that, and obviously your mom obviously seeing you being like, that's my role model. She's not going to, you know what I'm saying? Because if she does that, she then hurt you. You may hurt your father by, telling or whatever, but at the end of the day, that's going to hurt you in the long run. And at the end of the day, he can't run away from the fact of whatever he was going through, that you was eventually going to see it. That's just what happens. Eventually, we all grow up, we see things, and we're like, okay, things we take and then things we don't want to take. And it's going to be the vice versa for us as parents. There's things that our children are going to be like, yeah, I want to be like that. And then there's going to be things like, nah, I don't want to be that way. I think that's just the way life is sometimes. Was there any loss in your family, like growing up? Did you go through any hardships of loss before the age of before you even touched your 20s? Was there any loss during that time at all?
Not really. I wasn't super close with my dad's side. He had a huge family. He came from, hundreds of cousins, and I wasn't really close to them. I don't know if I would have preferred it that way because as an adult is when I suffered loss the most. And I didn't know how to handle it. Like, I didn't learn until I was already understanding of what really happened versus being a child and being taught this is how you grieve. I had to teach myself. So I don't know if I would have preferred to at least have exposure to loss in my life younger or if it would have been better for my own growth as an adult. But I didn't really have any loss until all of a sudden my 20s. And then everything happened at once. Yeah. So not as a kid.
Mm-hmm. Before we get into your 20s, I want to touch on still the teens. Now let's just dig into relationships. Now you're dating. When is your first real boyfriend or starting dating?
16.
So now you're dating at 16. What was that like for you? Because dating now, or kids now, they're so advanced in what they know because they see so much on the internet. When we grew up, the internet was kind of just starting. It was just getting there where we could see things. So dating at 16, what was that like? Did you date in your age range? Did you in that nature, or were you kind of naive in dating?
Dating. So my parents, as a teen, they were not trying to have me date. They were like, "You're too young. What are you doing? Everything was, they're a friend. They're a friend. They're a friend." And even my joke now with my mom is, I'm like, I look at my daughter, I'm like, yeah, with a friend, right? And she laughs about it. I think that I tried to be knowledgeable in who I spent my time with. And honestly, I was mainly only with one person for the majority of the time. I've learned a lot through him about myself. Thankfully, we've went through every relationship, the ups and downs and highs and lows. But because I had that consistency, I feel like the growth happened with us together. We merged together. There were moments when we kind of drifted apart, which I'm thankful for because I needed that because I was really only used to him. And then when we found our way back, I'm like, wow, this is your fairy tale story where they say distance makes the heart grow fonder. Yeah. And being that I was on my solo journey when the time came, it was right around college, which most relationships in high school fall apart. I think it had to happen. I think it needed to happen. And I think it happened for me. I think it happened for me. I think it happened for him. And I really had only one person that I took seriously at that time, which I'm, like I said, I'm very thankful for, because I don't know what would have happened if I was all over the place at that time. I needed that stability, especially at that age. 16 is for me being a girl, a 16-year-old girl, I'm like, thank goodness, because that's usually the age when you encounter a lot of different people, good and bad. I'm thankful that I didn't have those where people went through the different boyfriends, different partners, not me. Yeah. So I'm thankful for my experience.
What would you say about your 20s? Obviously, when I talk about my 20s in plenty of podcasts, I always reference it as like crazy. Like the craziness, my 20s was so much, it was like that. It flew because there was so much going on, so much loss, heartbreak, doing things the wrong way, just trying to get by on an everyday basis. That was the mindset instead of looking ahead. How would you say your 20s was for you?
My 20s, I think, was one of the greatest times of my life, but it was also, it broke me. I'm thankful for what I went through in my 20s. Like, I went through the typical heartbreak. I went through loss. I went through pregnancy, loss of pregnancy. I went through loss of family, and I learned to detach myself from certain people that were not good for me or didn't serve me anymore. And I would say, I want to call it crazy, but not really. I feel like crazy is not an appropriate word. I feel like, if anything, it was a learning experience. Like, everything that happened to me at that time, I feel like molded me into who I am now. And I don't think I would take anything back at all. Like, even the hardest days, I think made the happier days that much better for me, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Let's get into children. Did you always want children?
Yes. I always wanted kids.
Since a kid?
Since a kid, I pictured myself with a big family. After having one, not so much now. I realized how much effort. I didn't, you look at it as like an aesthetic thing, like, oh, it looks great, like having a big family. I didn't have a super big family, but I wanted that for myself. But now, as having one daughter, I feel like I can put as much of my energy into her as I can, and I like being able to focus on her right now. But I wanted like 5 or 6 kids, and then as I got older, I'm like, okay, maybe 4 or 5. And then as I got older, I'm like, okay, maybe 2 or 3. So because reality sets in. I also thought when I was 15, I'm like, I'm gonna have this, and that by 24 years old. Not so much. So yeah, I dreamed of having a big family, but now I'm good.
So, before having your daughter that you have now, there was a time period where you were pregnant.
Yes.
Describe not only what you went through with that, but describe right before, like the process of that happening, and then you getting pregnant, and then what happened.
So, it had to be it was 2019. I remember being in Atlantic City and not being super responsible. And months later, something was off. I knew something was off. I'm like, oh no. And I had been trying to hold off pregnancy for as long as I could because I felt like I wasn't ready. And later on, I realized you're never really ready. So I knew something was off. Something told me, I remembered FaceTiming my cousin, and she's like, I'm like, no. And she's like, I think you're pregnant. So I ran to the store, got a pregnancy test, and it was positive. And I let my boyfriend know, and he passed out. So, on the floor, I have a picture of him on the floor.
Passed out is crazy.
On the floor, like dropped to the floor. And I went and got another one from like a CVS or something, and that one popped positive. And you never really believe it initially. And I think it's because I had been 27, right around 27 at the time. And I was like, if it hasn't happened by now, who knows when it's happening for me? And that's when we made the appointment to go see my OBGYN, who is phenomenal and super supportive. And she was like, yeah, you're pregnant. And I want to say right around the third appointment that I had, she did the ultrasound. And it took a lot longer than normal. And I'm looking at her and she's looking at me. And she's like, wait a second. And I'm like, what do you mean, wait a second? And she's like, I think there's a second sac.
Oh,
and I'm like,
man.
a second sac? And she's like, I'm detecting another heartbeat. And I'm like, you mean not mine, not the baby's, but another one? And she's like, yeah. Before I say anything, I'm going to recommend you to go to a specialist, like a zwanger, where we can really hone in to see that that's what I'm seeing is what's really happening. So, lo and behold, we went to Zwanger at the time, and they did the ultrasound. And it's funny because initially it's done by, like, I think they're called, like, the ultrasound tech,
Yeah.
who they're really not supposed to say anything to you.
Mm-hmm.
But she totally knew. So she's doing the test, and she's looking at me, and her eyes are like this. And I'm like, what does that mean? And she's like, I can't tell you. I'm like, you have to tell me. And she just turns the screen to me, and I see like 2 little heartbeats.
Wow.
And I'm like, is that twins? And she's like, I can't say anything until the doctor comes in. So at the time they came in, and they were like, congrats, you have twins. And I just remembered calling the family, being like, you're never going to believe this, but there's 2.
He passed out again, I'm sure.
I'm sure. Forget it. I think at that point he had kind of like been prepared for it.
Yeah.
I think if anything, he was more proud that there were 2. I was the one that was struggling because I'm like picturing, I'm like, 2?
Yeah.
Because I don't have twins running around in my family. I'm like, where did this come from? And then later on, I found out when I spoke to my mom about it. She's like, well, actually, when I was pregnant with you, there was a second sac too, but you absorbed it, which I didn't know was a thing. So technically, twins run usually on the mom's side, so that they carry that gene. And that's when I found out I was expecting 2.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So what was pregnancy like? I mean, a lot of people have, pregnancy with one baby is, some people get sick, some this, that, the third. What was pregnancy like those 9 months of just, like, what was that like? I can't imagine. 2? 1 is crazy enough, but 2?
So it literally sucked. I was the poster child for every single symptom that you can think about. I had the nausea. I had the food aversion. I was sick. You couldn't put me in a car because I got a car. It was just absolutely, I envied the women who are like, oh, my pregnancy, I didn't even know I was pregnant. I'm like, I knew I was pregnant like 5 minutes after. I don't know how. Thank goodness. Like, more power to you. It was horrible for me. Like everything about it. In fact, I wanted to say I almost hated it. I almost hated being pregnant. Let me not say pregnancy because it's a beautiful thing, but because of what was happening to me. And then when you have more than one baby in your body, it's like times 2.
Were you extra hungry?
Oh, yeah. But then I couldn't eat anything. So I didn't like the smell of hot food. So I had to have like potato salad, cereal, yogurt, anything that didn't have a scent to it because I could smell. Meat smelled like a dead animal. It smelled like roadkill. I couldn't do it. So I had anything and everything that you can think of. I was the poster child.
Wow. So now, how long? So what happened when it came time to giving birth? What happened? What was the cause of everything going kind of left?
So I was about 17 weeks at the time, and I was working in the city. And I remembered going to the bathroom at work, and I just felt a stream of something just coming out, and I didn't know what it was. And a lot of my friends, I remembered running out of the bathroom and talking to my coworkers that had children, and I said, listen, it feels like I peed. And they were like, you probably did. Like, you probably peed, because that's a thing. Women, they have a hard time during pregnancy with, like, holding urine. And I'm like, I don't know. It didn't feel like that. And they said, they passed it off. They dismissed it as like, it's probably just, you peed or whatever. Right. And I remember taking the train home. I was taking the Long Island Railroad, and it just kept coming. And I'm like, this doesn't feel right. Like, just something told me in my instinct that it just didn't feel right. And I remember not being able to sleep that night. I came home and my underwear was soaking wet. And it just didn't, I'm like, this is off. Now
but it wasn't
is
blood.
Totally off. It was not blood. It was like so they say it had almost like an ammonia smell to it.
Gotcha.
And I had never experienced that before. Mm-hmm. So, of course, you do what everyone else does. You go to Google. And I always used to joke with my friends about, like, Google will tell you that you have the worst thing possible. Yeah. You have a headache and it's like you have cancer. Or your chest hurts and it's like you're having a heart attack. So I went through the Google phase and I was searching, and it said that there was a 0.001% chance that it was something called PPROM, which is preterm rupture of the membrane, premature rupture of the membrane. And I remembered going back and forth, and I'm like, that can't be. And what that basically means is you're going into labor. So I swore it wasn't me. I'm like, there's no way. But I just couldn't rest. And my mind couldn't rest because I didn't know what it was. So the following morning, I was supposed to go to work, and I just couldn't. And I remembered calling my OBGYN, and I said, listen, I have to come in and get checked out because something happened yesterday. I thought that I peed myself, and it just kept coming. And she's like, she didn't say much. She just said, come in, which right away was alarming to me. So I went in, I rushed to go to my OBGYN's office. She saw me right away. She puts, I put my legs up. She does the exam, and I still remember the look on her face. Her eyes got really big. And I'm sitting there, and I'm like, what? And she goes, you're dilating. And I'm like, I'm dilating. And she's like, I said, what does that mean? And she's like, it means you're technically in labor. So I'm like, okay. I freak out. And I'm like, what does that mean right now? And she's like, you have to go to the ER. So I said, okay. Obviously, I was spiraling after I heard that because I didn't know what that meant. Mm-hmm. And I'm carrying 2 babies at this time. And I'm only 17 weeks, which is, I think, barely 5 months. So she said, I don't think you should drive, though. And I didn't realize, what that meant at the time. And then I remembered calling everyone. I called my boyfriend. I called my mom. I said, I need to go to the ER. And right away, both of them dropped whatever they were doing, came and picked me up. My OBGYN actually called ahead to the ER department and said, listen, she's coming in, and we see that she's dilated. So they brought me in. They saw me right away. And I just remembered, like, everything happening all at once. They brought me into a room. I think at the time they were, like, trainees, looked inside, and just their reaction alone, they're like, and I'm like, what's going on? And they said, and one of the girls literally puts her finger inside. And I'm like, what's going on? And she's like, the umbilical cord is coming out.
Wow.
So I'm like, what do you mean? What does that mean? And she's like, it means your body is, because it's going into labor, they're coming. And I'm like, but I'm only 17 weeks. And they said, unfortunately, like, the body doesn't recognize, it doesn't matter. The body is saying to expel whatever's inside of you. So something's going on, something's happening. So I'm like, okay. And then at the point, we had a high-risk doctor that he had come in, and I said, can you tell me what my options are? And he said, so right now, because you're in active labor, 2 things. Number 1, your body is going to give birth to the 2 of them. They were both girls. And you're not at viability yet, which is usually around 23 weeks. 24 weeks is viability when the babies can survive outside of your body without you. But I'm 17. So he said, we can try to keep the pregnancy as long as possible. But what will happen is if we keep this pregnancy by 24 weeks, right? You keep it until the 24 when you hit viability, you might have one or both of them severely disabled.
Wow.
So I'm like, okay. So like when you say disabled, they're like pretty like almost vegetative.
Wow.
So I'm like, okay. So bearing that, you know, I didn't know what to think at that time. I went from celebrating pregnancy, celebrating twins, and now I'm finding out that I'm potentially losing both of them. And they also mentioned that this could pose a risk to myself too. And I said, okay, what does this mean? And they said, what they determined after doing some testing is that one of the twins actually had an infection in the sac.
Oh, okay.
And when that sac ruptured, it spread the infection to the rest of my body. So I was at risk for going septic. And I remember the doctor telling me, they came up to me and they said, listen, if you choose to proceed with this pregnancy, you might die. And I'm like, what does that mean? And they said, your body could, it might currently be going septic, which means you have an infection that's spreading to the rest of your body. And even if you do give birth, you might not make it. So I'm like, okay. And I just remembered thinking about what I was told. And I remembered saying, like, fighting back and forth. My parents, my boyfriend, you know, my mom was there. She was a huge supporter. But he had said, like, Steph, you gotta, there is no babies if there's no you. Like, this is the decision that you're being told. But you have to choose yourself. I'm like, no, I can't. And I remembered saying to the doctor at the time, I'm like, it's okay. Like, it's okay if I go. And they're like, no, it's not. Is that the decision you want to make? I'm like, I will keep whatever I need to do to keep them in there as long as possible because I'm laboring. And they're like, we have to basically reverse the labor, which could cause some serious damage to you. And I wasn't thinking of the consequences. I was just thinking of having kids.
Yeah.
And if that meant me not being in the picture, I was willing to risk that at the time. And I remember, if I even close my eyes, my mom being at the side of the hospital bed, and she's like, you can't do this. Like, you can't choose to, like, you have a choice, and you're choosing to die. And I said, if that means bringing life into this world, it's a risk that I'm willing to take. And what eventually happened is I kept them in for almost 18 and a half weeks. And I ended up having to give birth to actually going into labor with the first twin. And then a week later, so then because when you have twins, and this is why I was like a medical study, is because P-prom, exactly what I read about, is exactly what happened to me. And I was such a rare case because I was carrying two. And in a normal scenario, when you're carrying one, your body just goes into labor and it's done. But even though baby A had the infection, baby B was perfectly healthy. But the body's thinking, give birth, give birth,
Right.
give birth. So I remembered pleading with my doctor, like, I have to do whatever I can to keep this baby in. And she's like, that could kill you.
Right.
And I said, that's okay. I literally was ready. I'm like, that's fine. If I make it to 24 weeks and I give birth to a baby and it takes me, at that time, I was okay with that. And then I made it eventually to, so when I was in the actual hospital, what they had to do to try to keep the pregnancy at that point was they put you in a position called Trendelenburg. And Trendelenburg is you're upside down on the actual, I think it's like the hospital bed.
Yeah.
So my feet were over my head at all times. It was literally working against gravity. And I had to use a bedpan to go to the bathroom. I had to eat meals upside down. I remembered going through a slight form of depression because I couldn't look outside the window.
That's what I was going to ask you. Not to cut you up. That's what I was going to ask you. Was there a time where everything just became numb? Because I know you're going through every single emotion, sadness. You have such a big decision on your plate. Mm-hmm. But at any point, does it just become numb? Like in the process, not after. We'll get into after. Mm-hmm. But in that process, I know so much is going on, but does the feelings and as you're like seeing things, is it just becoming numbing to you?
So I think there was a period where I had to disassociate because I feel like I couldn't focus because I'm being told so many different things. I have the high risk so many people were interested. I remembered having students coming into the hospital room because they were so curious that this was like, I thought someone was going to come and write a study about what was happening to me. So I think a lot of people weren't considering the fact that I was actually suffering as much as I was because they were so focused on, wow, this is like an anomaly. This doesn't happen, but it's happening to me. And if it wasn't for the village that I had that had showed up, I don't think anyone would have actually understood. So I had to separate myself just to be there because there were moments when I had a very tiny window in my room, and I remembered not knowing what outside looked like because I was in the hospital for almost a month from the first day that I went in and I got admitted. And I had thoughts of like jumping out. I remembered saying like, I just need to jump out the window. And it felt at that time, it felt not good, but it felt like it would make everything go away. And it sounded very contradicting because I was willing to take myself for the life of the children that I thought I was bringing in. And it got so bad to the point where they actually brought a wheelchair into the room so that they can kind of bring me around. But the hard part with that, to answer your question, the reason why I also went numb is because when they brought me around in the wheelchair, I was actually in the maternity ward. So I was surrounded by people that were giving birth.
Giving birth, yeah.
So as they're bringing me around in the wheelchair, the nurse is like, you're going to need to close your eyes. And I said, why? And she's like, because we're passing the nursery. So I'm there and, we're passing the nursery. And I remember hearing the babies crying. And I was like, damn, what I would do to hear the sound of a baby crying. And when they brought me around, I was battling, like life and loss. And like I said, I had never went through loss before in my life, and this was significant. And you would hear in the hospital, they would have the bell when you would ring it every time a mom gave birth. And I just remembered hearing that sound over and over again and knowing like that's not gonna be me. And so when they finally brought me back to my room, I sat there and I was like, damn, I almost wish that I would have rather jumped, Mm-hmm. And it left me with these thoughts of, when you think about pregnancy, you don't hear about stuff like this. You hear about the baby being born and the parents visiting, the balloons. And I remembered it was during COVID, and we had to get food deliveries because you couldn't go in and out of the hospital. And my boyfriend went down the elevator to go pick up a delivery because I hadn't eaten. And as he was coming up on the elevator, there was a man that was in the elevator too. And he hits the button to go up to the maternity unit. So I guess the man knows the hospital well. And he goes, oh, I see you're going to the maternity unit, congratulations. And he's like, thanks. And he gets off. And my room had a ladybug outside of the room. And the ladybug indicated that it was a loss. And it was really meant for the staff to identify that this was a sensitive situation. But for me, it was a reminder. So ladybugs have a special significance in my life because they remind me of how I stood out from the other rooms in that hall. So I had to be numb then, because if I wasn't, I really don't think that I would have made it out with having some kind of sanity. Right. So I kind of had to as a defense because I didn't realize how stressful something like this was physically, mentally, socially. I had testing done every day. I got blood work done. And that's when they told me, after twin A was born and I had twin B, I was trying to keep in my body as long as I could. They told me that eventually I was going septic. So my OBGYN came to my room and she said, I just want to let you know that your body is battling an infection. And I said, what does that mean? And she's like, you're slowly dying. And that's when I had to realize that, that was the cards I was dealt. And I had to decide whether it was worth giving birth to a child that could be severely disabled, or I would wait until it would take me.
Yeah. That's very tough. Yeah, that's tough. Now, so you made your decision, which is a hard decision, period, for anybody to make. What was it like mentally going home after seeing what you've seen, feeling what you felt? How was it like for the next, I don't even know how long, but how long was it just when you got home, everything was just off? Because you live a life and you have the ups and the downs, but there's traumatic moments in life. There's moments that really make you feel sometimes, is it worth being here? Things of that nature. So this moment is a traumatic moment, a traumatic time. How do you deal with then trying to get back to everyday life, not pregnant anymore, and trying to maneuver? And then on top of that, did you even want to have kids after that?
So the loss was during 2020.
COVID.
So COVID, like I came out of the hospital and it was like lockdown, like the world shut down. I mean, I did too.
Yeah.
So I remembered the day that I found out I was being discharged, and I remembered looking up at the news and they were like, schools are being shut down and grocery store, anything that if you didn't have to go, you weren't going. And I remembered packing my stuff at the hospital, and I think it didn't really hit me as hard until I left, because I had always envisioned going to the hospital to have a baby and walking out with a baby. And I remembered leaving, and I don't know why, but the hospital felt, after being there for almost a month, felt like home to me. And I think it's because I felt safe there, because I had everyone that I needed that was readily accessible to me. So leaving it felt like I had to fend for myself from a physical standpoint. I felt like I didn't have, if I needed something at the hospital, I had doctors around. The ride home is probably the most impactful ride that I've ever had in my entire life, because honestly, I cried the entire way home. And I remembered walking in the door at my house, and it was empty. And I cried so hard that I lost my voice.
Wow.
Because I had said to myself, this is not the dream that I had. Like, this is not, I was supposed to have two, and I went home with none.
Right.
So I remembered sitting in my living room and crying for as long as I could until I couldn't, and I had literally nothing left. I don't think I had any water left in my system. And I kept saying how it wasn't fair. And what I didn't know is that when you actually give, and this is probably so traumatic for some people, but when you give birth at that stage, you can actually hold them.
Yeah.
So I held a 17-week-old baby and an 19-week-old baby in my arms. They gave them to me together. So I had never seen what that looked like outside of an ultrasound. And I just remembered having that imprint in my head. And I just remembered they made hats for them. And the hats were so little and so tiny. And I could hold them with 2 fingers. And I just smelled the both of them, because that was the last moment that I had. And being home was just a reminder that that was my piece of reality that was outside of the hospital. And it grounded me because you don't hear, when you hear pregnancy, you don't hear this side. They don't teach you this side in school. You learn about how to prevent pregnancy, you learn about motherhood, but you don't learn about loss. So I had to teach myself, okay, how do I move on with a part of me, literally, that's no longer here? And it was really tough because most women that go through what I went through don't talk about it because it's triggering, it's traumatic, but I felt like it gave me a sense of belonging because I wanted to feel like I was with a group of people that went through what I had went through, because you can't relate to the mothers that have children. And you also can't relate to the people that have never had children. So you're in this weird gray area where it's like, okay, where do I belong then? Because I know that I'm a mother, but I'm not mothering. But I went through pregnancy and birth. So where does that put me? So being home was just a reminder of how life goes on. And then when the world shut down during COVID, I couldn't go for a walk. I couldn't go through, normally I found peace in hiking or going, taking walks around the neighborhood, but the world was basically trapped inside closed doors. And I was in a hospital for a month, and all I wanted to do at that time was escape. And there was nowhere to escape to. So I almost felt like I was in prison.
Right.
Because there was really no outlet for me at the time to recover and to heal. So it was rough.
Yeah.
It was rough. Healing was rough. Recovering was rough. And just being in that journey alone at that time. And of course, my boyfriend was suffering too in a different way. But physically, I was lactating. And I'm like, my body is doing what it's supposed to do. Where was this then? Like, why didn't it cooperate with me before? Like, I'm doing what mothers do after they have kids. I was bleeding. I had the signs of postpartum, but no actual children to account for it. So it was really rough.
So we're going through that, and now there's got to be so many doubts in your head, like for the future. Do I want kids? Will my pregnancy?
Right.
How will it go? And now you have a beautiful daughter, right? Describe to us what that was like when you found out you was pregnant with her, and then what was your thoughts going through the whole entire pregnancy until the end?
So we had a follow-up visit with my OBGYN after I went home, and they told me that I remembered having the conversation before we left the hospital, and I said, listen, to my boyfriend, I said, listen, do you feel like you're ready to go through not this part, but to go through pregnancy again? And he was like, honestly, I was prepared to be a dad. So the timing is on you, not me. I'm ready when you are, which is what I really needed to hear at the time.
Say, yep.
And I got the clearance from my OBGYN that there was a 4-month period that I had to wait, and then you can try again. And I went back and forth because in theory, that sounds great. But mentally, I'm like, am I ready to go through this again? When I found out that I was expecting was July of the following year, and I had known my body. I made it a point after my last experience to learn my body. I knew my body better than anyone, any doctor could tell. And the doctors even said, you know things that you really shouldn't. I went to school for the stuff that you know. And I said, trauma can break you or it can make you better. And I decided whatever happened to me before, I would educate myself and advocate for myself, that I wish I did a little bit more the first time. And I ensured that the next pregnancy, because I had found out I was pregnant, that anything that happened to me, such as the incident with going into labor, that I would be prepared for, that I knew it was happening and that I knew what to do. So in July, when my daughter was conceived, I actually knew that I was pregnant. And I knew because I felt it. And I made an appointment with my OBGYN. She did a scan and she's like, oh my God, I can't even see it. Like, I'm looking in your body and all I see is your uterine line thickening, which either means one of two things. Either your period's coming or you're pregnant. And she goes, I don't know how you know you're pregnant. I said, I am. And she's like, it's barely coming up on a pregnancy test. And I said, I am. And I made a follow-up visit like a week later, and she's like, oh my God, you're pregnant. I said, I told you. And she's like, I don't know how you, I said, I just know. Yeah. I've learned. So obviously I was overjoyed, but I couldn't enjoy it.
Right.
Pregnancy felt different to me because you normally hear when people are expecting, you get like the high of, oh my God, I'm bringing life. And all I kept thinking was, this is going to happen to me again. And I don't know what I'm going to do when it does. And I prepared myself. I did not announce it. I couldn't celebrate it. I was afraid to tell people. You just wanted to get through it. I just wanted to get through it. Right. And I didn't even really feel like I was reluctant to share it because when I had my first pregnancy, I announced that I was expecting. Mm-hmm. And 2 weeks later, I had to announce that I lost them. Yeah. Or a month later, I had to announce that I had lost both of them. Mm-hmm. So I envied the women that were able to enjoy the pregnancy because my anxiety, was through the roof because I had sworn that something was going to happen because I felt like life would not allow me to enjoy motherhood because it was taken from me. So I remembered it drove me crazy. I remembered if I felt like even the slightest discomfort made me feel like something was happening. I'm like, oh my God, I'm losing it. I had one night specifically where I was going to the bathroom and it just felt different. And I went to the hospital and I started hysterically crying in the hospital room because it gave me like PTSD. And they put me in a gown, and I was right back to my first pregnancy where I'm like, this is it. And they told me, they're like, you're okay. Like, the pregnancy is okay. It's thriving. Don't worry. And it's easier to say, don't worry, until you become that 0.01%. When you become that Google search, that's the worst case scenario. When you become that heart attack with the slight heart pain, when you have cancer with the headache, that was me. Right. And anything that anybody said, I had to take with a grain of salt because I'm like, you don't understand what it's like to be the small percentage, to be the case study for med students, to be that part of the book that's like, this never happens, but it happened. Yeah. So pregnancy, although I was thankful and grateful, it wasn't enjoyable until I gave birth. I remembered having anxiety until the moment she came out. And I remembered hearing her cry. And when I tell you the relief, the overwhelming feeling of relief that I had felt hearing her cry reminded me of being in the hospital the first time and hearing the babies crying in the nursery and me saying to myself, why couldn't one of them be mine? Right. And here I was experiencing that. So pregnancy with my daughter, like I said, I'm so thankful for it because I got to experience it the way that I felt should have been experienced, but I felt guilty because I couldn't enjoy it because I just didn't know, like, how would this story end? Right. So it like I said, thankful and appreciative, but definitely not the way that I wanted to have pregnancy and probably future pregnancies. I'm probably never going to enjoy pregnancy.
So what would you say, obviously you've been blessed with the daughter that you have now, learning how to be a parent as it goes on and never really forgetting that trauma. what would you really tell the mothers out there that might experience it in the future or might right now, as they watch this episode, be dealing with this same trauma or know somebody that's dealing with the same trauma? What would you say to those mothers that are experiencing, even if it may not be the same exact situation, but just loss in general? What would you say to them when it comes to trying to find yourself, trying to get back to who you are?
So for me, I heal through talking about it. There are some women who, when I announced that I had lost the pregnancy, I remembered so many women were like messaging me, and they were like, "Hey, this happened to me." I'm like, "This happened to you?" There were people that I didn't even know got pregnant that were kind of close to me that reached out, and they were like, "Hey, you are very courageous, because there's no way that I could go online and talk about what happened." And whether it was a 5-week pregnancy or a 20-week pregnancy, they were like, "You are stronger than most, because there's no way that I could ever come to face with what happened and then speak about it openly." But it was therapeutic for me. And it was therapeutic because, like I said, I was looking for like a belonging, and I felt very out of place. Especially even physically, being in a maternity ward and being the only person that had a ladybug on the door.
Yeah.
So I wanted to kind of create a space for women that had been through what I had been through without the room for them. And I had joined a lot of Facebook groups for women that went through loss, and they shared their stories with me. I had people, surprisingly, I had some women who were like, "Hey, I lost my son or daughter right around the same gestational age that you lost your twins." And some of them were like, "Can you show me like what they looks like? Because I didn't get a chance to look."
Wow.
So I was sharing photos of underdeveloped children to people, to women that wished that they had that opportunity, and they were like, I couldn't do what you did. I couldn't hold them. The doctor came to me, and I would say, like, just do what you have to do. And I took that opportunity to hold these 2 little babies that you would never think would make it to the other side, and I think for me, I wanted to be that person that other women felt comfortable with talking to, because there was no one like that for me. And no one in my family had gone through that. None of my friends that I knew of had gone through that. It took for me to actually say it and own it, because listen, this is who I am. Like, there's no shame in what I went through. If I can make one woman feel better about what they went through and that they're not alone, then I've done my job. I've done a service to them. Because I remembered at that time saying, damn, there's no one that I can actually share this with that's going to understand and tell me, like, hey, I get it. Because I had people telling me, like, oh, I get it. I'm like, you don't get it. No. Even how I raise my daughter now, I always keep, because I tell myself, it's like a mantra in my head, like, you are the 0.01%. So when people tell me, like, yeah, but that's not going to happen, that's so rare. And I'm like, I'm the rare.
But it can happen, exactly.
So when it happens to you once, when you become the anomaly once, you can be the anomaly twice. So, it's like hitting the lotto. You're 1 in millions. And that was me.
Yeah.
So I made it a point to try to be open about it. I have friends that have experienced loss, and I try to be the support and comfort that I think I wanted at that time. I want to try to be that for them, because I feel like we don't talk about it enough. We don't know about this. I had men that were like, I didn't know that pregnancies could do this.
Right.
I didn't know that they can go south. I didn't know you could lose a pregnancy that late. I'm like, yeah, you can. So just being that educational support for people and just being the person that others feel comfortable talking to, I feel like gives me peace, because I know that I'm giving back in some way, even if it's unfortunately through trauma.
Right. I think what's key about just even this episode is it's going to speak to moms that went through it. It's also going to speak to moms that haven't been through that. It's also going to speak to people that are thinking about getting pregnant.
Yep.
This is an episode for, like you said, not only women, but men. Men can really learn from this. This is something that, it's maybe 0.1% or whatever the case may be, but losses can happen throughout pregnancy anytime, right? And it's just the awareness, and some, like, people are gonna need to hear this. Like, I didn't even know all these details, truthfully, and I've known you, but I didn't know all these details down to what you said. So I just appreciate you for being a hero for a lot of people, because that's truly what you are. You know, besides being somebody that, it happened to me, but no, like, you're a hero to a lot of people that are gonna need to hear this, that are gonna need to get through just a day in order to walk. You know, like, there's people that are laying in bed right now depressed because this happened to them. And some people, you're going to give them hope. You know, you've had a pregnancy after, you have a beautiful daughter. You still have the man in your life that was there from the beginning. So it's a beacon of real hope. And, I just want to say thank you for sharing it, because it's something that not a lot of people can talk about, like you said. So I just want to say thank you for sharing it for real.
Yeah, no, I like I said, I love being able to connect with people on that level, especially with, like I said, with men, because a lot of them don't feel comfortable talking about stuff like this. Either they don't have anyone to talk about it to, or they don't know who can relate, because I'm sure if women can't, then men probably struggle twice as much.
Sure. Yeah.
And just being able to talk through it helped me get over it as best as I could. I mean, you never really get over it.
No.
And like I said, even to this day, I worry, because every pregnancy after that is technically considered high risk.
Yep.
Whether you have a perfectly healthy child or not, you're seen by specialists that are making sure this never. So it's a reminder, because it's like, even though every pregnancy is different, you still have that gut feeling where it's like, it can still happen to you.
Yeah.
And also having the village that I had and having that support system was major to me. I had a memory of being upside down in the hospital, and my boyfriend was trying to give me a sense of normality, and he was actually painting my nails because I just wanted to feel like a person again. And I have pictures of him just taking nail polish and like putting nail polish on my toenails so that I could feel a sense of normality. And having that, and choosing people that will choose you is so important, because in situations like this, you want people who are going to show up for you. And fatherhood starts at conception. And that was something that was a reality for me, because I realized that he was acting already as a parent, even before, unfortunately, even though I brought my children into the world sleeping, but he was exactly the father figure that I would have expected, even before they made it earthside, that I would have wanted. And so that's also important too, just to know who you're dealing with. And when you have trauma in your life, who's going to be there for you at the end of the day when you're suffering? Right. So if there's any way that I could be of service to people, I always will. And that's another reason why it motivates me to talk about it, because I know so many people don't.
Right. Well, Stephanie, again, I really do appreciate you being here. It's just so important, to talk about these things, to get these things off your chest, out of your thoughts. And like I said, it's extremely helpful to me and many others, and especially women and mothers. So I just appreciate you being here. And with that being said, this is another episode of the Culture Shock Podcast. We out of here.